The titles are held in Newcastle every 3 years. This year, players have come from all over the state, the ACT, and 9 players from the United States and 1 from Sweden. Preliminary games began today, with the semi-final set down for the Newcastle Badminton Centre from 10 in the morning, and the finals expected to begin at 11:30. Titles up for grabs are the men's and women's singles and doubles, as well as the mixed doubles.
There has been a constant stream of politicians to the Hunter ever since the federal election was announced. Everyone from National Party leader Ian Sinclair to Sport and Tourism Minister John Brown and Health Minister Neil Blewett. Today, the opposition's health spokesman Michael Bohm was on the hustings, trying to sell the coalition's health policy. He visited the Cessnock retirement village, where he inspected facilities before meeting some of the older residents who grilled him with questions. Senator Bohm agrees that there has been plenty of confusion about the coalition's health policy, and he blames this partly on the government, who he says are deliberately making misleading statements about it. He admits that some people are angry that Medicare will be dismantled but the levy retained. He says these people just don't understand what they are on about.
Basically, we're allowing Medicare-type care to be provided through the private health funds at government expense. Our Medicare levy is going to be a means by which people who can afford to pay will contribute to the health care of pensioners and the disadvantaged who can't afford to pay. You're not buying something with your Medicare levy, you're providing help to those who can't afford to pay for it themselves.
On a more personal note, Senator Bohm admits that he has played a prominent role during this election, but he says he doesn't want the position of leader if John Howard fails to get voted in.
Can I say this to you? We have an outstanding leader in John Howard. He has my total and absolute support. If anything, I guess I might have got a little bit of publicity for being such an outspoken supporter of John Howard, and I hope to continue getting publicity for being a supporter of John Howard when he's our new Prime Minister.
First, the acceptance into the Winfield Cup early in April. Then major sponsorship from Henny Penny just a matter of days ago, to go with a great support already promised by NBN and the Newcastle Herald. And now New South Wales government support announced today from Treasurer Ken Booth, Sports Minister Mike Cleary and local MP
came about
John
because I'm delighted to announce today that the Knights and the club, the Newcastle and District Coalfields Rugby League Club, will receive a $600,000 grant and a loan of $150,000 at 5% for a period of 5 years. And I see the work is well advanced, and when the people in Sydney start to drive up to Newcastle and participate in some of the games, they'll be equally delighted with the facilities that they have. Unlike some of the clubs that came in new into the competition, you'll have something to offer spectators. So
you're going to have to break for the Knights now and perhaps give South Sydney the shove.
Oh, I don't think I can do that. I mean, I've always supported Newcastle because they supplied so many good footballers to South Sydney, with Jimmy Morgan and, of course, Johnny Sattler. But no, I'll stay with South, but I'll watch them positively and hope that they perform well.
Thank you.
Located on the shores of Lake Macquarie at Spears Point, the multi-purpose centre is to be a focal point of the area. Stage 1 of the Bicentennial project consists of a recreational facility, including an amphitheatre that will seat more than 900 people. The $3 million development has come under harsh public criticism regarding the allocation of funds, the location and practical use of the centre. At last night's Lake Macquarie Council meeting, Alderman Edwards moved that the report on major capital expenditures submitted letter to the local government department be published in Council's business papers. Then Alderman Brown moved a rescission motion against Council adopting the Development Control Unit's recommendation granting approval for Stage 1 of the development application. Mayor Jeff Pasterfield will this week call a special meeting in an attempt to resolve the matter. The time and date have yet to be decided.
Deputy Chairman of the Knights, Michael Hill, today announced the signings of 24-year-old Stewart as well as specialist prop 23-year-old Adrian Shelford. He says the two signed on the dotted line during a whirlwind two-day trip to Wellington.
It was very cold and we saw these guys and saw quite a few others. We liaised with Howie Tamati, who was the New Zealand hooker up until last year. He'd played in 24 tests. He's the Wellington Director of Coaching. He was a great help to us. He gave the fellows that we were interested a big rap.
While you're in New Zealand, did you scout around for any other talent?
We did see some. The young New Zealand players are under an embargo. They're not allowed to come until they've played 6 tests or done 2 tours, and that really puts a dampener on bringing any young players. The others that we saw, fellows like James Lulawai, we thought that they had their best behind them.
Both Stewart and Shelford
Haggerty trying to wrench the ball off
the
him.
Kiwis in 1985.
Again, Stewart.
Is seen
Oh, Sam Stewart, good running onto the ball. Has Kurt Sorensen with him. Has to be a try. Kurt Sorensen just trotting along to the line.
And Shelford for 2.
A gap beautifully made. Nice.
Senator Evans, who joined Labor member for Hunter Eric Fitzgibbon on the campaign trail today, says mines like this one at Warkworth will benefit from Labor's coal policies. He says the $8 million in research grants, 2 of which will be spent in the Hunter, is testament to this. Coal and Allied will receive sizable grants for work to improve mine ventilation and sealing, while Elcom will investigate short-haul mining techniques to allow previously difficult mining to occur at Vales Point and Munmora. Safety is another major consideration, according to Senator Evans, and Newcom will carry out research into an automatic early warning system in continuous mining operations. Senator Evans says to ensure that we maintain and increase our share of the world coal market, Australian coal producers and mining unions must cooperate to streamline their operations.
Well, we've been encouraging a very aggressive marketing attitude on the part of Australian coal producers, and clearly that's going to have to be maintained. The international marketplace is very difficult at the moment. Demand has been slowing up, obviously in Japan, the decline of the steel industry there, but also energy production worldwide. At the same time, a lot of other countries are now coal producers, are coming on stream. We've got a lot more competition than we used to. So it's going to need a cooperative effort on the part of government, of managements and the trade unions to ensure that we stay lean and trim and competitive to get us through this very difficult period.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Country Report, a very special edition coming to you from the Maitland sale yards. And we're here for a particular reason. Over the next couple of weeks we'll be running a series on some of the basic aspects of starting your own farm. Now for many people, when they start a property, they're interested in fattening or breeding cattle. The first place to come if you're interested are the sale yards. For many people, visiting the sale yards for the first time can be a daunting task, not knowing exactly where to begin or what to do. But you soon find out the agents and the locals are more than willing to help. After deciding to what extent your property can be stocked, and indeed what sort of animals would be suited to your land, it's time to see what's available on the market. And it's a market which obviously fluctuates, depending on livestock numbers, market demands, and of course pastoral conditions.
I think it doesn't hurt if you make yourself known to an agent, and perhaps the person that you've bought the property off to start with generally had an agent, and they usually say, well, look, I sold with so-and-so whilst I dealt at Maitland. If you prefer to find your own agent, well and good. I think once you make yourself known, the agent will only do as much as he possibly can to help you. Firstly, he'd probably like to have a look at your place, and then you could discuss the possibility of what type of cattle your place would carry, whether it be cows and calves or steers and bullocks, and whether it's a fattening property or just a growing property, you know.
Now, once you've decided what sort of cattle you want on it, how do you actually determine which pen to come to at the yards?
Well, generally you would try and buy your cattle out of the store cattle section, which that commences around 1 o'clock of the afternoon, and all the cattle are usually penned in their categories, whether they be steers or weaners or cows and calves, and I think you've only just got to ask the locals and they'll soon point them out, or ask one of the agents, they'll soon tell you where the store cattle start.
Now, the actual sales themselves, for a lot of people the whole process is very quick, very hard to understand. What actually happens in the selling process?
Well, once we get up there to do our job, well, as far as I'm concerned, we're operating on behalf of the vendor and he comes first. So it's my ambition when I'm up there to get the highest price possible for that vendor. So if you've also got a fellow that wants to buy off you and you know he's looking to buy off you, you keep your eye out for him, and just to make sure that, you know, he doesn't miss them if perchance that he really wants that lot yard of cattle.
Now, I've noticed too the beasts are marked too. What's that mean?
Well, firstly, they're marked with an agent's identification number. Each agent, there's 5 agents here, and we all have our own ID number. So my number, for instance, is number 4. All my cattle are marked with a 4. So if there's any discrepancy with cattle, it makes it a little bit easier to find them. The other marks are butchers' brand marks. They're applied to the beast after it's been sold, and each butcher has his own identification mark.
Well, to some terminology, you may hear cattle referred to as either store or trade cattle, or cattle for the export market.
Well, trade cattle are the cattle that's used in the retail shop, your local corner butcher type thing. Usually, to give a dressed weight would be around, well, generally they range from about 150 kilos to sort of 200 kilos dressed weight. And those cattle are found in the young cattle section, which is the first part of our sale of the morning, commencing at 9 o'clock. And then our export cattle, they commence at 11:30. They're usually cows, bulls, bullocks, steers, anything that's used for the overseas market, although some of the steers may be used for the domestic market in a different type of trade.
And then, of course, the store cattle in the afternoon. They're for people who want to, say, might be interested in stocking up their properties?
Right. Restockers. Yep, that's the store cattle section, and as I mentioned, that starts at 1 o'clock.
Okay, finally, just any advice for someone who might be interested in getting into fattening cattle, into the cattle market itself. What sort of advice would you give them?
Well, firstly, don't try and overstock to start with, which many people do. They think if they've got 20 acres, they can carry 20 head of cattle, and there's no, you know, to my way, I think it's very, very hard to carry one beast to the acre. But I think your country has got to give you the story as to what you can carry.
It's always handy to remember that Department of Agriculture officers are willing to give advice at any time. Owning a property and buying livestock demands certain responsibilities, and it's better to check in detail with the experts before committing yourself. As well, a new edition of a booklet produced by the department's officers called Getting Started in Beef Production should soon be available.
And of course, livestock officers with the Department of Agriculture are more than happy to give free advice on the best ways of stocking your property. Well, while we're talking about cattle, let's go to this week's information from the Maitland sales.
325 store and 1,150 fat cattle were yarded. The trade cattle market remained firm to a few cents dearer. The store cattle market remained firm. At Singleton, 1,640 cattle were yarded, with trade and export cattle firm to a cent dearer. And at Scone, 900 animals were yarded, with the market remaining firm.
Well, from cattle to goats, and as we all know, goats are big business. The recent Go Goats conference in Brisbane was told there's a shortfall of about 53,000 tonnes of fine goat fibre on the world market. And that's prompting many farmers, particularly in the Hunter Valley, to take advantage of this lucrative market.
Jeff Patrick and his family have been breeding Cashmere goats on their property Patdale at Rothbury since 1981. They've about 1,000 head on 220 hectares. It's a tranquil setting and a business that's set to boom. Cashmere is regarded as a quality fibre. At the moment, China produces about 80% of the world's yearly cashmere clip. That's about 4,000 tonnes. In comparison, Australia produced only 40 tonnes of cashmere in 1986. That's a situation the Australian Cashmere Growers Association wants changed. The association sees cashmere production as a viable alternative for many farmers.
Australia's sort of got feral goats that have been here since Captain Cook was here. Goats were dropped off probably with the first fleet, and we had the full range. And probably within 50 years of Australia being settled by Europeans, we had milk goats, we had just general run-of-the-mill meat type goats. We had some cashmere goats imported. There were people actually stole goats from China and brought to Australia to start a cashmere industry. And we had mohair goats brought over to start a mohair industry. With the lack of fencing that they had in those days and the tremendous wild areas that they had, they lost them. And that was the basis of Australia's goat flock, which we've got a tremendous flock. Basically, they've interbred over, say, 150, 200 years, and we have reasonable quantities of good cashmere goats in the bush, but probably only 10% of the feral population.
Now, what sort of potential is there for cashmere?
Cashmere's, I guess, really got the greatest potential in primary industry in Australia. We've got a market which is probably only getting about no more than 25 to 50% of its requirements, and it's grown in one small area in the world. Australia is proving that it can grow good quality cashmere, so it's purely a function of Australians starting to utilise our stock and get into the game. Goats probably survive on every type of terrain in the world. In Australia, goats have done better in the drier regions, basically because they haven't had the parasite problems in those areas. Once you move onto the coast, and the closer you get to the coast, the higher the rainfall and the more attention you've got to pay to parasites. And that's really the greatest holdback.
I noticed too that you've got a pretty well fenced in area. Do they need good fencing?
Out of the wild, they need very good fencing. Once they're domesticated, they require a minimum of fencing. In fact, you can actually teach the goats where they belong, and they virtually don't pay much attention to the fences at all. You can actually, we've got all electric fencing, and I can turn our fencing off on this property, have done for a fortnight or 3 weeks at a time, and had no goats move through them, so that speaks for itself.
Now, collecting the cashmere, how do you do that? Do you shear goats or do you...
Right, no, it's in the rest of the world where the bulk of it's produced, they are actually combed. It is the same as you'd comb a dog or an Angora rabbit. It's just combed out with a fine comb. In Australia, we're orientated towards shearing, and I would say 99% of Australian cashmere goats are shorn.
Breeding cashmere goats is not only appreciated by Jeff and his family, but also by Lady Diana, the Patrick's Border Collie,
Go back behind. Go
who
behind.
could quite easily show up some of her more famous sheepdog relatives.
Lay down. Lay down.
Well, what we're doing is
Come back here. Come here. Come here.
basically trying to produce good quality animals to provide bucks for the industry, basically, I guess, and to produce good volumes of fleece so that it can be shown that they are commercial. Well, it actually is shown. We are actually producing good volumes of fleece already.
Go back around.
But probably over the next 10 or 15 years, we hope to produce probably 3 times the volume that we're producing now per animal. And that's the main thing, per animal.
And for those of you who might want to find out some more about cashmere goats, the seminar will be held at the Malta Conference Centre on July 11 and 12. Well, from Cashmere to the election, and a special public meeting was held last week in Maitland to discuss a number of key election issues. At the meeting were New South Wales Farmers Association President Michael Tooth and National Farmers Federation Executive Director Andrew Robb. Two farm lobby groups have targeted 22 marginal seats in next month's election, a list which includes the seat of Hunter. Both men agree little attention has been paid in this campaign to the important issues affecting farmers, small business and indeed the wider community. Issues such as interest rates, union power and fuel charges. But back to the sale yards. This hive of activity continues to prove its worth. Not only a good place to find out what's going on, but they're also a good spot to hear a few opinions on the coming election.
I think there are still a lot of doubtful areas that people are not understanding sufficiently. Therefore, they're debating as to whether the policies they're advocating are going to work or not.
Well, if Bob Hawke is back in, I think I'll leave the country.
You reckon?
Yeah. Well, he hasn't been doing a good job now, and talk's cheap, and that's all he's been doing is talking for the last, 4 or 5 years.
Well, my feelings are that Hawke and Keating have to go. No risk. We have to really get rid of this Labor government.
Why is that? Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think with the people in small business, which we are, we don't have any hope at all to survive while the Hawke and Keating are in charge of this country. That's just my own personal opinion, Mark.
It'll be terrible if Labor goes back in, won't it, for us?
Now, why have they got it wrong? Why has the federal government got it wrong?
Because they're a Labor Party, and the Labor Party don't worry about the rural industry at all. They will look after the factory worker and the metropolitan citizens, where your voting power is. It's as simple as that.
When you look at it, a lot of people have got very short memories. It's not only Australia, it's worldwide. I think the present government what's in, I think they're doing a fantastic job. If they was given a term that they could run and be left alone, I think they would be in a better country.
Interest rates, yeah, would be one big thing around here because the price of land, if you were to buy land around this part of the world, the interest rates the way they are, you just couldn't buy land at an economical way to run cattle in particular.
Well, that's this week's edition of Country Report. If you'd like to write to us and let us know what's happening in your district, write to Country Report, Post Office Box 750L, Newcastle 2300. And until next time, have a good week.
The HMAS Darwin sailed from Sydney this morning and slipped quietly to its berth at Lee Wharf. The $500 million vessel was commissioned in 1984 and is now preparing for evaluation trials following a 3-month refit earlier this year. The sleek Oliver Perry Hazard-class frigate is a forerunner to the Navy's proposed new frigate fleet. New ships, when built, will be very similar to the Darwin, but will be slightly shorter.
Well, we carry out 3 functions. We're an anti-air picket, we're a surface frigate, and also we look after anti-submarine warfare. The aircraft that's coming on board, the Seahawk, will add to our role as an anti-submarine frigate. At the moment, we're currently working up and getting us everything used to working with a helicopter.
And if you'd like to see the latest technology the Navy can offer, Darwin will be open to the public between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.